Today we'll be working in my workbook called The Commandments and Laws of God, which covers Exodus chapters 20 through 24. Looking at the table of contents, we have already completed the first 5 chapters. We started with the actual 10 commandments spoken by God, and he spoke them out loud. This is not the time of the stone tablets, that comes later, but he spoke them verbally to the people of Israel. And that shook them up so much that in chapter 2, they were so afraid of hearing from God directly like that. They tell Moses that we just want to hear from you and not directly from God. So then Moses goes up on the mountain and he gets all these societal laws for the people to work with as well. And the laws of God concerning Hebrew servants. Male and female servants are handled differently. And this goes in detail how each servant is supposed to be handled. And they're the Hebrew servants, not the foreign servants. They're handled differently as well. Then we have laws concerning personal injury. What happens if you take out someone's eye or their tooth or whatever? Then we have the laws of God concerning animal injury. And this focuses mostly on being gored by a bull, but you can extrapolate that to any other animal that kills or hurts someone. So now we're going to be talking about the laws of God concerning protection of property. And this is Exodus 22, 1 through 15. And then this will include Exodus 21, 33, 34. When I wrote this, it appeared like these scriptures would fit better in this chapter than the chapter before, which had to do with animal injury. Exodus 22, 1. Whoever steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it must pay back 5 head of cattle for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. In this case, the general rule was already given in the commandment, thou shalt not steal, Exodus 20:15. We now have specific situations. Apparently, if you stole an ox or sheep, according to the scripture, you're going to pay back what of 2 things? 5 head of cattle or 4 head of sheep? If realistically, instead of slaughtering or selling it, you just included the ox or sheep in your own herd, does this rule apply? Doesn't seem to. Therefore, the penalty was based on what you did with the stolen livestock. If you had slaughtered it, then it is several days worth of meat. And with no refrigeration in those days, it would mean that you're selling the leftover meat or giving it to several families, or you're selling the livestock live. Either way, selling or slaughtering was pre-planned. Which one is more valuable, the ox or the sheep? I would say generally the ox would be, because you've got 5 in return. Does the thief go to jail? Doesn't say that he goes to jail. Do you remember what happens if a thief cannot make restitution? If you look at page 32, basically what happens is if a thief cannot make restitution, then becomes an indentured slave. In our society, a convicted thief usually goes to jail, yet God stipulated that the thief become an indentured servant. Which way is better, do you think? Are there problems with both? I believe there's problems with both. And the fact if they go to jail, they're not going to be learning anything. And there's no way to pay it back and all these things. And yet, if they become an indentured servant, then they're have a chance possibility of stealing and everything else again. So there's problems with both. God was actually more lenient than we are now in making them indentured servants. Exodus 22:2. If a thief is caught breaking in at night and is struck a fatal blow, the defender is not guilty of bloodshed. But if it happens after sunrise, the defender is guilty of bloodshed. In our society, if we kill someone who is breaking into our home, it has to be due to the feeling of imminent danger. Otherwise, we are the criminal. This is to prevent killing someone who happens to pick the wrong house to enter or accidentally killing a family member who came home late. Based on the Bible, if a thief is trying to enter a house at night and the homeowner kills him, is the homeowner guilty or not guilty of bloodshed? They're not guilty of bloodshed. In today's world, we would still have to prove imminent danger. If a thief stayed in the other part of the house, away from all your family, you could not move through the house to kill him as you could just call the police. But if he entered your room or your family's room at night, then you could kill him as you or your family could be considered in imminent danger. Based on the Bible, if the thief broke into the house during the day and you were there and you killed the thief, would you be guilty of bloodshed? Yes, you would be. The premise is that during the day you should have the ability to defend yourself. However, they did not have guns or weapons. In our case, if a thief had a gun and you felt you were in imminent danger, you could still kill him and be justified. Number 3, is there a difference in liability between the law of the Bible and our law today, given the changes in home size and types of weapons? Or is the law basically the same? It's the basic is imminent danger. The houses were smaller then. And so usually when you opened a house, you're already into where that people are already in imminent danger. Here, the houses are bigger. And so there's more likelihood you can get away or get help rather than being attacked by the thief. Exodus 22:3b. Anyone who steals must certainly make restitution, but if they have nothing, they must be sold to pay for their theft. If the stolen animal is found alive in their possession, whether ox or donkey or sheep, they must pay back double. If a thief is found guilty, is he always to make restitution? Yes. Even if he stole because he was hungry or needed to feed his children? Yes. If a thief cannot make restitution, then what happens? He becomes an indentured servant. He becomes a servant for no more than 6 years. Now we have the answer regarding 2 on page 56. If the stolen animal is found alive in their possession, then instead of 5 times or 4 times, how much would the thief pay in restitution? Just double. Actually, we have another animal listed here other than the ox or sheep. Does this mean really any animal stolen is to be paid back double or more depending on the status of the animal? Yes. Basically, this applies to all animals. All the penalties depend on the value of the animal or item stolen. Who puts the value on these items? If there's a question if an item or livestock was stolen or accidentally taken, who makes this decision? The judges, the elders of the people, the judges. Remember, God is giving all these laws to Moses for the judges to have in judging disputes. Exodus 21:33. If anyone uncovers a pit or digs one and fails to cover it, and an ox or donkey falls into it, the one who opened the pit must pay the owner for the loss and take the dead animal in exchange. Usually a pit was dug for grain or water storage and also to catch wild animals. Why was a pit normally dug? For grain or water storage or to catch wild animals. What animals are spoken about here? A donkey or an ox. As in the prior case, does this rule really apply to any domesticated animal? Yes, indeed it does. Verse 34 assumes the animal dies. Who is responsible, the owner of the animal or the person who opened the pit and left it open? Person who opened the pit and left it open. Who takes care of the dead animal in the pit? The owner, the person who has the pit. Again, who is deciding the value of the animal? Probably the judges. What would happen if the animal was removed from the pit unharmed or hurt in some way but still alive? Then the restitution would be in like kind. Leviticus 24:18. Anyone who takes the life of someone's animal must make restitution, life for life. Exodus 22:5. If anyone grazes their livestock in a field or vineyard and lets them stray and they graze into someone else's field, the offender must make restitution from the best of their own field or vineyard. In order for the livestock to stray, does the field or vineyard have a durable fence around the field or vineyard? No. Let them stray. Does this mean the owner of the livestock knows that his animals can freely move out of his field or vineyard? Yes. Is the owner of the livestock that strayed into another field liable for what his livestock has done if he knew they would stray? Absolutely. What if the owner of the livestock did not know that their fence was broken and his livestock gets into his neighbor's yard? Is he still liable? Hmm. I would say he's still liable for the loss, but maybe not as much. What is the restitution based on for this offense? Um, um, he must repay with the best of his field or vineyard. Again, who makes the decision on how much and what is given? The judges. Exodus 22:6. If a fire breaks out and spreads into the thorn bushes so that it burns shocks of grain, bundles of loose grain, or standing grain, or the whole field, the one who started the fire must make restitution. It is customary at certain seasons to burn the weeds and other refuse of a farm, which is collected for this purpose, into piles and then set on fire. Such fires may spread and cause extensive damage to the crops or the harvest of a neighbor still in the field. The loss in such cases was to fall on the man who set the fire. In these verses, is there a difference between someone accidentally causing the fire to someone purposely causing the fire? No, it's the same because you started a fire, whether, and you didn't control it. So, whether it was accidentally went farther or on purpose, you still have restitution. Where I live, this is a very real possibility. I live out in the country where everyone has burn piles, and the time to burn those piles is very short. We live in a high fire danger area, and unattended burn piles frequently get out of control. Burning during the wetter seasons works well, as nothing unplanned can burn. The reason for burn piles is that it is the most effective way to dispose of debris. What is a foodstuff stuff that is in the fields in this verse? Grain. This would put this particular verse in a May-June timeframe. Again, does this law really have to do with all produce grown and waiting in the fields? Yes. Again, who's deciding the monetary amount of the harvest lost? The judges. Exodus 22:7. If anyone gives a neighbor silver or gold or goods for safekeeping and they are stolen from the neighbor's house, the thief, if caught, must pay back double. But if the thief is not found, the owner of the house must appear before the judges, and they must determine whether the owner of the house has laid hands on the other person's property. Who is our neighbor? Our neighbor is anyone in our proximity. It could be next door, on the block, in the same town, in the same country, or in a bordering country. In this instance, what is given to the neighbor for safekeeping? Silver or gold? In verse 22:7, who stole the silver or goods? A thief. In this case, a thief doesn't just repay what he stole, but how much does he have to pay back? Double. If the thief cannot pay restitution, what happens to the thief? He becomes an indentured servant. But if the thief cannot be found, what is the suspicion? That there never was a thief and the person watching the silver or gold took it. Who is going to determine if a neighbor or a thief took the goods? A judge. If the neighbor is found guilty of stealing the goods, what do you think his restitution will be? At least double, but obviously he also loses a friend. Exodus 22:9. In all cases of illegal possession of an ox, a donkey, a sheep, a garment, or any other lost property about which someone says, "This is mine," both parties are to bring their cases before the judges. The one whom the judges declare guilty must pay back double to the other. Does this verse cover any possible item that could be stolen or accidentally taken? Yes. In this case, two or more people have brought a case to the judges to decide. What is either side's case? One thinks it's theirs and the other one thinks it's theirs. Who's going to arbitrate this difference of opinion? The judges. You are the judge. What would you be looking for in order to make a decision here? Witnesses? Yes, I would look for witnesses. Paper evidence? Yes, if there was a document that says who owns what, that would be good. Hearsay, what other people hear versus see. Not as important, but you could also use it to listen. And reputation of the two bringing the case forward. Again, not necessarily perfect, but still you could think of it. And then E, who paid you the most? Definitely not. If you're found guilty of either having the stolen goods or bringing a false report, you'll have to pay what? Double to the other person. Scriptures continue. Exodus 22:10. If anyone gives a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any other animal to his neighbor for safekeeping, and it dies or is injured or is taken away while no one is looking, the issue between them will be settled by the taking of an oath before the Lord that the neighbor did not lay hands on the other person's property. The owner is to accept this and no restitution is required. Does this situation have to do with animals, the harvest, or money? Animals. I relate to this situation well. I often have someone watch my chickens while my husband and I are away. If I trust my chicken sitter, then if a chicken dies or is injured or is taken away by a predator, I don't consider it his fault. If I did, I would look for another chicken sitter, but then chickens aren't as expensive to replace as a donkey or a sheep. What do you think is the issue that is brought before the court? Whether the person was negligent in his responsibility of taking care of his neighbor's sheep or animals. Who is taking the oath? The person who owns the animal or the person who was watching the animal? The person who was watching the animal, they're taking the oath that's saying, I did not do anything to this animal. This is based on the commandment, do not lie, and do not bear false testimony against your neighbor. If the oath is given, what does the owner have to do? He has to accept it. Is there any restitution from the person watching the owner of the livestock in question? If the person watching gave an oath that he did not cause the problem with the livestock? No, there's no restitution he has to pay. This is the innocent until proven guilty premise. However, if later evidence shows otherwise, it all may be reconsidered. Exodus 22:12. But if the animal was stolen from the neighbor, restitution must be made to the owner. If it was torn to pieces by a wild animal, the neighbor shall bring in the remains as evidence and shall not be required to pay for the torn animal. If the animal was stolen from the neighbor, what needs to be done? Restitution must be made to the owner, either by the thief, or if it can't be proven that a thief took it, by the person who watched it, the neighbor who watched it. Who is the restitution to be paid for? I just said that. If the neighbor says it was not stolen but torn to pieces by a predator, what does he need to do to prove his statement? He needs to bring the torn to pieces animal as proof. But if he cannot provide the evidence of an animal killed by a predator, then it's as if he is to pay restitution. In summary, if an animal just died and the carcass of it is available, how will the matter be resolved? Where am I getting here? The restitution in this offense is based on the best of the. Nope, number 5. Okay. Let's see if I can find the answer that I wanted here. Obviously, let's just see. 5. Okay. If the animal just died and his carcass is available, then the neighbor needs to make an oath that he was not responsible for the animal's death. That's right. The animal just died and the carcass is available. So you bring the carcass to prove that the animal was mauled and you're not liable for the death. If the animal was stolen and the thief can be found, how would the matter be resolved? The thief would have to pay for double for the animal. If the animal is dead due to an attack of a wild animal and the carcass can be found, how is the case resolved? Again, bring in the carcass to proof. it, then nobody has to pay restitution. If a neighbor cannot prove anything regarding the death or loss of animal, who pays the restitution? The neighbor. Exodus 22:14. If anyone borrows an animal from their neighbor and it injured or dies while the owner is not present, they must make restitution. But if the owner is with the animal, the borrower will not have to pay. If the animal was hired, the money paid for the hire covers the loss. Why would an animal be borrowed? Siring other animals, making babies. If the animal is borrowed, why is the owner of the animal present? Because they're waiting for babies, being pregnant. If an animal was borrowed and the owner is not present and the animal is injured or dies, who makes restitution to whom? The person who borrowed the animal would have to make restitution. If the animal was borrowed and the owner is present when the animal is injured or died, is there a restitution? No, there's no restitution. He should have been able to see it and stop it. Why would the borrower not have to make restitution if the owner of the animal is present when the animal died? Because the owner of the animal would have stopped it. Is there any additional restitution if the animal was hired and not borrowed if the animal is injured or dies? Yes, the money paid for the hire covers the loss. So now we get to the crossword of this chapter. Okay, so let's see what we can find out here. 5. In order to prove the animal was killed by a wild animal, the neighbor needs to produce the carcass as evidence. Number 6. Anyone who steals needs to make restitution. 9. If you steal a sheep and slaughter or sell it, you must pay back 4 sheep for the sheep you slaughtered. 10. If a thief is killed while entering a house during daylight, the owner is guilty of bloodshed. The defender is guilty of bloodshed. 11. A pit is usually made for grain or water storage. 1 down. All cases are brought before the judges for decisions. 2. If you steal an ox and slaughter it or sell it, you must pay back 5 head of cattle. 3. The owner of an animal that strayed into another's field must pay from the best of his field or vineyard. 4. If the thief is caught breaking in at night and killed, then the offender is not guilty of murder, not guilty of bloodshed. 7. If a thief cannot make restitution, he must be sold to pay for his theft. And 8. If an animal falls into a pit and dies, the person who opened the pit pays the owner for the loss. Okay, well, that's the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed it.